Greetings dear friends, Dragon here once again. If it's your first time finding the channel, as I always say, do please consider clicking that red button and subscribing. Today getting into a review of the fantastic Chinese boxer, arguably Jimmy Wang Yu's greatest film, and I think certainly in my opinion my favourite of Jimmy Wang Yu's movies. His first as a director, also as co-writer and as star. Phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. Just released by 88 Films, their first Shaw Brothers release in a little while, and this is spine number 27 in their kind of ongoing Asia collection series. Fantastic set, fantastic disc, fantastic transfer, tremendous movie. We're going to get into it. This is going to be light spoilers, so if you've not seen the movie and want to know nothing about it, I will leave a wee chapter stop down below if you just want to skip ahead where I talk about the extras and the disc itself. But first off, speaking a little bit about the movie, like I say, written or co-written by Jimmy Wang Yu and directed by Wang Yu. This followed on from his success at Shaw's with Shang-Chi, making the One-Armed Swordsman. This was 3 years earlier, 1967. The Chinese Boxer came in 1970, and really hard to understate just how influential this movie would be. It would go on to inspire a whole bunch of other movies, both at Shaw's and elsewhere. We would see an awful lot of similarities in Bruce Lee's Fist of Fury, which would come 2 years later in 1972. And we would see an enormous influence from another Shaw's movie, both in terms of story and in cast. King Boxer, which will be the first film in the Shawscope Volume 1 box set coming from Arrow, that I have already reviewed. So if you want to pop over and check out my review from that, I'll leave a link to that at the end. But today we're going to focus in heavily on the Chinese Boxer itself, what makes it great, and why you might want to check it out if you haven't already. So first off, the name, the Chinese Boxer, released in the States as Hammer of God. Its Chinese name was Long Fu Do, literally meaning Dragon Tiger Fight. Wang Yu plays Lei Ming, a student of a martial arts school, where in the very early stages of the film, and the opening credits really, a former student from the school, played by the phenomenal Chu Seung. He's playing Dao De Ye. He arrives at the school having been rejected by his master there, and is kind of returned having learnt Japanese martial arts to try and pit his Japanese martial arts skill against his former school. He ends up challenging the school, beats a few fighters there, and then leaves, returns with the intention to kind of try and fight his master, is humiliated again, and so returns having recruited some of his colleagues from Japan. So Lo Lei leading the group of Japanese fighters who come over. They then decimate the school and pretty much killing everybody bar one person. The only survivor from this attack is Wang Yu, who initially goes into hiding but can no longer stay in hiding when he kind of sees that the villains have gone on to take control of the town. They've set up a gambling den and are starting to do increasingly more and more heinous acts. So he decides to take revenge, not only for the death of his classmates and his master, but also really to kind of try and fight against their influence in the town and take back control. He does an awful lot of this whilst masked, so it's kind of like an early proto-superhero movie, where once he's learnt the skills that he will use to combat them, he returns wearing kind of surgical gloves and a surgical mask. So there's a lot of kind of unexpected parallels at a time when we've just gone through a lockdown where all of us had to wear masks. So kind of seeing Wang Yu running around kicking ass whilst wearing a white mask is fun on a whole bunch of unexpected levels that might not have been the case kind of pre-lockdown. Tremendously shot, beautifully shot. Cinematographer was Shan Ha, but it was really only his second movie as cinematographer for Shaw's. I think a lot of the motivation for why this film looks the way it does is from Wang Yu himself. I think like a band's first album, a director's first movie, a director's always out to try and kind of make a name for themselves and try things that they haven't seen themselves in other things. So it's a very experimental movie cinematography wise. A lot of shooting through unexpected things, so he makes frames around the characters through circles, triangles and squares that he'll find through the sets. If he's shooting outside, he'll shoot through grass, so there's quite often a constructed frame that we don't often see in other Shaw movies from the time. He was trying an awful lot of tricks, and at this point it's important to say that he was really successful at Shaw's at the time this was made, but making this was a fight. So he'd made the incredibly successful One-Armed Swordsman, which a lot of people will say was the first Shaw's movie to make $1 million. $1 million Hong Kong dollars. I don't think that's entirely true. I think there was one other drama that had actually broken the $1 million barrier first, but it's certainly the first martial arts or first wuxia movie to break the 1 million Hong Kong dollar mark at the box office. So you'd expect Wang Yu would have been given an open slate to do whatever he wanted. This was not the case. He brought the script for the Chinese Boxer to Run Shaw, who summarily said, no, you're too young, you don't know what you're talking about, not going to happen. So then he took it to Shang-Chi, And Chang Cheh said, no, not going to happen. You're the wuxia guy, you're the swordsman guy, you don't want to do an open unarmed combat movie. It's not going to work. What if it's a failure? Your career will be over. Wang Yu was very frustrated, so threatened to quit. Said, okay, if I can't make what I want to make, I'm not going to work here anymore. Called their bluff. They relented and allowed him to make the movie. It would go on to make $2 million, 2 million Hong Kong dollars at the box office. So double the success that we would see 3 years earlier from The One-Armed Swordsman. So incredibly successful movie. But I think the damage at that point was done. Making this at Shaw's was such a fight that Wang Yu left soon after and went over to start making his own movies. First and foremost, he made The One-Armed Boxer, and then the rest of his career we could get into on another video. The time that he made this, he was being paid a pittance by Shows. I think he was getting $200 Hong Kong a month. It's about £20 UK or about $25 US. He would get a bonus of $400 for completing a movie, so less than £40 UK or what, $52, $53 US. So yeah, a pittance. So for how much money these movies were making, he wasn't really being recognised, which is I think why he was probably growing so frustrated. But the co-stars that he has in this movie would go on to make The King Boxer. Most notably, the villain in this movie, Lolei, who's playing the chief Japanese fighter, would return as the hero in King Boxer. And we would also see the love interest from this movie being played by Wang Ping. She would return as the love interest in King Boxer. And the guy who kind of kickstarts all the trouble in this, Chao Xing, the former disgraced fighter in the Chinese Boxer, would return as a Japanese swordsman in King Boxer. So they share quite a few of the same cast. Also the head of the school, played by Fang Ming here, Master Li, would also play the head of the school that Lolei attends in King Boxer. So you'll see an awful lot of similarities. So if you're excited for the Shaw Scope set and you kind of want to get familiar with the cast, this is an incredible place to start. I actually maybe slightly prefer the Chinese Boxer as a movie overall over King Boxer. I think this is more inventive and it tries and introduces a lot of the same tricks that we would later see in King Boxer. The training montage that's in this, the pamphlet or the booklet that comes with the release, draws an awful lot of parallels to Rocky, and you can certainly see a kind of training montage. Wang Yu's character remembers back after the first time they encounter Japanese fighting style, when the disgraced fighter comes to the school and is beaten by his master initially. His master explains that the only real way to combat these techniques is to use Chinese iron palm and light skills. Light skills we'd see an awful lot in the Venoms movies. Cheng Sheng was a light skills master, so a lot of acrobatics, somersaults, gymnastics, that sort of thing. It's a little bit more simplified in the Wang Yu version. He was never the most gymnastic performer. He would always prefer to just kind of use trampolines for jumping to get a little bit more air, but we certainly do see him studying and training in light skills. So he weights his ankles down and he uses the kind of hot coals or hot sand to train his fists. And part of the reason why he goes into disguise is this process makes his hands blackened. So he wears these surgical gloves to kind of try and disguise the fact that he knows the iron palm. And in one very quick little throwaway shot, it's kind of blink and you'll miss it shot, he demonstrates the strength of the iron palm so incredibly well when he first comes up against some Japanese fighters with samurai swords, and he just breaks one clean off with his iron palm, which is pretty great. Anybody who's ever watched any martial arts movie will know about the legacy of Japanese steel, and how well constructed those swords were and how hard they were to break. So the fact that he breaks it in one clean move is pretty impressive. There's a fantastic last reel of this movie shot against snow, which I think they shot in Korea, so a lot of it's actually outside, so I think it's real snow. There's also some stuff I suspect on maybe on a soundstage in Korea where I think they've artificially created snow. It's hard to tell, but they blend incredibly well, but it's really nice to see. So the last reel of this movie feels very fresh in a way that we didn't see from an awful lot of other Shaw Brothers movies. So there is snow in The One-Armed Swordsman, which I wonder if that's kind of what he was inspired by. That idea of kind of red blood against snow works really well, and it's great to see here. This is a pretty bloody movie, and we certainly see kind of some eye gouging that we would see in King Boxer. We see an awful lot of people being cut open by swords, and a lot of blood flying just from the strength of his iron palm attack. So you'll certainly see an awful lot of Shaw's very noticeably fake bright red blood in play all the way through the movie. It has, like I say, tremendous, incredible camera work, both in terms of its framing of shots, but also of camera movement. He does this thing a lot where he'll start on a very close-up shot and then use the zoom lens to kind of zoom out to make an establishing shot. So they're kind of using the zoom lens to kind of create a multitude of shots rather than having to kind of move the camera and change the setup. So you'll move from a close-up of a desk of kind of somebody kind of counting stones, or kind of people chopping food at the market, and then he'll use the zoom lens to zoom out to then kind of give you an establishing shot, and then inverts that a lot with the hero. So for the hero, you'll start wide and then zoom in to a lot of kind of close-up on the face. So as a movie overall, I think it's beautifully constructed, heavily inspired by Japanese cinema. You see an awful lot of an influence, both in terms of some of the subject matter, but also in the colour palette and the way that it's been shot. I think Wang Yu was a huge fan of Chambara movies, and indeed would go on to kind of make his own one. He would take his one-armed swordsman character over to Japan and make a movie with Shintaro Katsu. He would make a Zatoichi movie, so there is the Zatoichi meets the one-armed swordsman, which you can find on the Criterion Zatoichi set. If you kind of want to dive deep into that, I would heartily recommend doing it. That set is phenomenal. That's a different story for a different day. But yeah, as a martial arts movie, as a Shaw Brothers movie, it's way up there. I'd say probably a 9 out of 10 for the movie itself. It's phenomenal for its time, really very seminal and ahead of its time. So the fighting is a little bit more rough around the edges, as Wang Yu's always was. He was a bit less kind of well trained in the martial arts. He was more of a kind of street brawler, street boxer. So there is less kind of nuance to some of the shapes that he will throw. You don't see such perfect form as you would see in the Lau Gar-lung movies or from the Venom Mob. He was not that type of performer. It was always a little bit more kind of full of life and full of enthusiasm rather than being full of technique. But that doesn't make it any less great to watch, and in some ways makes it probably a bit easier for kids who are watching these movies and loving them to go out and pretend to be Wang Yu a lot more easily than you could pretend to be one of the Venom Mob. It's a lot harder to kind of pull off convincing kind of mantis boxing if you're pretending to be Lo Meng than it was to kind of pull off kind of Wang Yu's slightly haphazard kind of kicks and punches. But they're still great regardless. I'm a huge fan of him as a performer, as a director. I think he's constantly undervalued. He made this movie when he was 27. I think Spielberg made Jaws when he was 26. It's almost the equivalent of Spielberg making Jaws but then also playing the shark, which he didn't do, and nor did he write the film. So Jaws is a phenomenal achievement. I personally see this as no less of a phenomenal achievement. He was trying an awful lot of things that hadn't been seen before in Shaw Brothers movies, and he was doing it with a studio that didn't really want to let him do it in the first place. So talk about an uphill struggle. Amazing, highly recommended. Jumping onto the disc itself, the quality of the transfer is beautiful. It's phenomenal. I'm not too sure exactly when this transfer has been done. It's a HD remaster from the original negative. I think probably done by Celestial. I'm not too sure if 88 Films have commissioned their own restoration of it. I don't think so. I think they're just using the Celestial remaster, but it looks beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Colours really pop. It's really crisp, it's really vibrant, and it's really consistent throughout. There are quite a few scenes at night. There's one amazing sequence when Wang Yu sneaks in and sets fire to the villain's lair, and it's mostly still quite a dark set because it's meant to be shot at night, but then the fire ripping through it looks phenomenal, absolutely incredible. So yeah, colours look really, really good throughout. It looks really crisp, looks really vibrant, sounds fantastic. We get the English and Mandarin audio versions on here. We also get a commentary track by Sam Dayan, her second for 88 Films. She also did the commentary on King Hu's spectacular Come Drink With Me, and she does great commentary tracks. She's really, really knowledgeable, does great research. I didn't know about Wang Yu's wage at that time, and that all came from her commentary. And also she leans hard into the stories of what the movie was like for Wang Yu to get made at Shaw's, and speaks a lot more than I have here about what happened after he left Shaw's when he went on to work at Golden Harvest. So yeah, that's the main extra that's on here. Was the one that I went to first, but that's not to undervalue the two others that are on here. We got a great interview with David West. It's about 17 and a half minutes, speaking about the influence of the Chinese boxer. We also get a fantastic interview taken from the Frederick Ambrosine archives. He sat down with Wong Jing, who plays one of the Japanese fighters. It's about just under 14 minutes long, and really good. He speaks about his work on the One-Armed Swordsman, how he'd previously been more behind the scenes working as a stuntman, and this was one of the first movies to kind of give him sort of on-screen time working as an actor, and he's great in it. He doesn't have a huge amount of talking. I think Lo Lei is really the only one of the Japanese fighters that really actually speaks, but he's kind of there in the background, and has quite a strong presence as kind of one of the villainous henchmen, and his one-on-one scene when he's going up against Wang Yu is pretty exceptional too. So kind of great seeing the interview with him on here, and the set's rounded out by the Hammer God TV spot and Hammer God trailer and the original Hong Kong trailer. Beautiful. Cover art by my Kung Fu brother, Kung Fu Bob O'Brien, is tremendous. It's one of my favourite ones that he's done this year. Really beautiful. We see this sort of triple shot of Jimmy in the middle training his Iron Palm. a shot taken from the last reel of Jimmy fighting in the snow. Beautiful. Actually slightly wrapping around, which they've not done in one of their Shaw's slipcases before, but fear not, if you're a spine collector, you still flip it around to the other side and you kind of get the traditional black numbered spine that we've seen on all of the other 26 of the 88 Shaw Brothers releases. If you want to know what they are, I've covered all of them, and we'll leave a link to that video at the end, and you can kind of run through all the ones that have come before this. They're all fantastic in their own unique ways. This is one of the better movies though. I'm a big fan of this series. I'm really hoping this just keeps on going and going and going. We already know that there are more on the way. We have already had another one just released as the Disciples of Shaolin, spine number 28. If you're very lucky, you will already have. That I'm going to be getting into next, so look for a review of that next week. With Phenomenal Disciples of Shaolin, directed by Chang Che and starring Alexander Fusheng. I'm extremely honoured to be able to give away a copy of both of these, thanks to my friends at 88 Films. Look for the launch of that competition soon, so that'll be coming hopefully in the next couple of weeks. But for the time being, this is one that I would highly recommend that you do track down. Try and track it down if you can when it still has its slipcase, and then you'll make sure that you get the booklet inside and also the poster featuring the original Hong Kong poster art on one side here, and featuring a big glorious size print of Bob's wonderful artwork for it, which always works better when it's bigger. And you usually only get these on the initial wave of release, so once the first 2,000 or so of these have sold out, it will just go down to just being the scannable case, but you will always get the reversible art. I've just chosen to turn mine around so I would get the Hong Kong poster art on the inside, but you do also get Bob's artwork on the other side. And that's pretty much it, folks. One I would highly recommend you tracking down if you're a fan of old school Kung Fu, if you're a fan of Wang Yu. Essential. Really, it's one of the better Shaw movies from the early 70s, literally from 1970, and really interesting in seeing how things would evolve, because this is kind of the beginning of the open hand combat, or of the kind of unarmed combat, of which we think of most Kung Fu movies as being really kind of weapons in Kung Fu movies. Is a different tale for a different day, and we're getting some great examples of those coming later on, specifically also from 88 Films, who've just teased out the poster art for Legendary Weapons of China, one of the best Lau Gar-Lung movies, and Bob has done a truly incredible job on the cover art of that. At the time of making that was just teased out yesterday, so some of you may not have seen this. That's coming in February next year, along with Flag of Iron, also with a great Kung Fu Bob O'Brien cover art on that one too. And again, we'll get into those in due course. Come February, we'll be reviewing both of them, or I will be reviewing both of those here. But thank you very much for watching this today. I hope you have a tremendous rest of your weekend. Let me know if this is one that you're tracking down, if it's one that you've already got, if it's one that you love, if it's one that you're not going to bother getting. All that sort of good stuff, tell me in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you on the next video tomorrow. Take care.